everyone, welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Bethany.
And I'm Ken.
And we're just a couple of spooky kids in love that love some scary stuff, which
Yes,
is
we do.
why we love SCP. It's very unsettling and creepy and sometimes downright scary.
And today we're checking out SCP-1678 UnLondon. We're checking out the Exploring series. So we're going to check out Exploring the SCP Foundation from them. This is a channel that's been recommended to us as far as SCP content goes. And yeah, so if you want more SCP reactions from us, we got a playlist down below in the description of this video.
We do indeed.
SCP-1678 UnLondon. Modern humans have been building structures to protect themselves in case of disaster for a long time now. From storm cellars across the Midwest of the US, to air raid shelters in the UK,
But now they're all fancy.
to personal fallout shelters built to
shelters.
protect against a possible nuclear attack. Sometimes these shelters are small, only capable of sustaining a handful of people, while some are built to hold thousands of people. And then there's UnLondon. SCP-1678 can be summarized simply enough. A duplicate city built beneath London in a Victorian style of architecture.
That's cool.
But this wouldn't be an SCP without some anomalies.
Can I go visit?
SCP-1678 is located a kilometer beneath the city of London, and from what the Foundation has explored, seems to be an exact duplicate of the city as far as street and building layouts are concerned, as well as building sizes and shapes. As far as the Foundation can tell, 1678 was created instantaneously through an unknown process, centered on the Houses of Parliament. This is evidenced by the fact that the buildings nearest to the Houses of Parliament are constructed with traditional materials, with no obvious flaws in design.
So who lives there?
But as the distance increases from there, buildings start to incorporate odd materials and designs, such as being constructed entirely out of copper pipes, or buildings containing no floors or windows. This is a very similar effect to SCP-184, the Architect, signifying a possible correlation between the two. Buildings are made with a Victorian-era style of architecture, and mostly resembles London as it appeared during that time. But there are also duplicates of more modern structures made in a Victorian style. The city is very lightly illuminated, with traditional gas lighting, although some of the distant lights appear as just floating orbs, and it's unknown how the city is supplied with oxygen or gas.
Just waiting for Mary Poppins to float on it.
It would seem that the city has been outfitted to house far more people than normal, with closely grouped bunk beds found in any building suitable for housing. Despite this intent of mass housing, however, researchers have found the majority of buildings to be unfit for habitation, with large amounts of mold, damp, and poor construction, likely due to whatever effect created these buildings in the first place. The only food that has been found so far comes from steel vending machines located in every building used for housing. These vending machines take the form of pumps, similar to fuel dispensers, and upon payment will pump out a half-liter of edible gel.
Oh!
This substance, known as Dr. Goody's Wonder Food, contains various minerals, vitamins, fats, and bulking agents, as well as several unknown molecular structures. While this porridge-like substance will sustain an individual for a number of weeks, long-term consumption will cause individuals to become dangerously underweight, with a strong chance of contracting illnesses such as scurvy. Additionally, regular consumers are found to be more obedient to authority, and less likely to engage in acts of violence or sex, and will possess consistently high morale as long as they keep consuming it regularly. Foundation personnel are forbidden from consuming the substance.
With good reason.
Although most of the buildings in the city that the Foundation has explored are used for housing, they have found some notable others. Researchers found a duplicate of the Natural History Museum, which contained representations of several SCPs in an exhibit titled The Fall of Man. The Foundation hopes to expand their contained perimeter to reach the museum, so that they can form a forward command post and eventually reach the Houses of Parliament, where they believe who or whatever is responsible for creating the city can be found. Upon entry into the city, a voice recording will play, in which an individual proclaims that if you're hearing this, then the world as we know it has ended. The recording seems to imply that all the horrors from the dark corners of the world have broken free and taken over the planet. The ones who sought to contain these horrors, possibly alluding to the Foundation and other organizations, have been killed or scattered, along with anyone else who resisted. The world belongs to them now, and the survivors can gather in UnLondon, where they can wait and prepare for a new beginning, since the monsters will inevitably turn on one another. The voice goes on to say how the survivors will eventually emerge from the city back to the surface, where their children will play among the bones of the long dead, and there will be a new age of mankind. They end the recording by saying how they will summon forth UnLondon, and it will burst from the ashes like a phoenix to become the first city of the new world. A number of other voice recordings periodically play throughout UnLondon, some just reciting the current time, others warning you to stay away from restricted areas, and others that are a bit more perplexing. Some of them warn about mimetic creatures, suggesting the listener get a psych assessment to find out if they're affected. One mentions a pattern screamer, which someday will likely get their own video, but they are essentially non-entities outside of reality that grow much more powerful based on mass awareness. Another says that swelling and abnormal growths could be an early sign of possession by an entity known as the Slaver Man, which as far as I'm aware is an unknown entity unique to 1678. So far as the Foundation is found, UnLondon is almost entirely devoid of living creatures.
Okay.
But there are a number of entities present in the city. Primarily, there are the Bobbies, which seem to act as the police of the city. They are constructed of human corpses that have been dismembered and reassembled with hinges and screws.
Oh my god.
And their heads are wrapped in bandages. So far, they have only responded to the Foundation's presence by immediately attacking their personnel with improvised weapons. When doing so, the Bobbies emit a sound similar to a police whistle, and loudspeakers in a 100-meter radius play an audio recording telling the criminal to halt. Bobbies will also be notified somehow if an individual approaches a restricted area in the city, and will soon arrive. These entities are extremely resistant to damage, and so far only high-caliber rounds and explosives have destroyed them. It's believed that these Bobbies are actually former criminals, taken to a location in the city called Bryson's Home for the Poor. This is evident by the inmate-style jumpsuit worn under their uniforms, as well as one of the audio recordings mentioning that crime will not be tolerated and society's tormentors will become its defenders. It's also suggested that the same fate will happen to the impoverished. There are also small flying constructs throughout the city known as the Eyes in the Sky, consisting of organic matter connected to a copper exoskeleton in the shape of a small bird.
Pigeons can be more
believed to
terrifying.
once resemble a pigeon. These constructs are equipped with a small video camera and possess an uncanny ability to track individuals. Finally, there are the Wretches, humanoid figures dressed in rags, usually resembling old women. They are typically found on street corners with begging dishes, and beg for food or money from any personnel nearby. Giving them food apparently causes them to begin weeping, before vanishing in a burst of black smoke. Another audio recording mentions them by saying not to pity the wretch, and allow them to pay the price of their betrayal for all eternity. So there's quite a few interesting things at work here, and even more things that are only hinted at or implied. A good SCP is often one that makes you continue to ask questions, even after finishing reading it. Who built UnLondon, and what disasters it meant to prepare for? How was it built instantaneously, but with such defects? Where did the first Bobbies come from, and what did the Wretches do to betray the city? At a glance, UnLondon is not an incredibly original concept, as underground or otherwise remote utopias have been used throughout fiction, from BioShock to Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, and most glaringly China Miéville's UnLondon. While the concept might not be terribly original, there is enough here to pique one's interest, and it's certainly strange enough for the world of SCP.
Welcome to UnLondon, the city of the survivors, the city of the free. Together, fellow citizen, we will wait and prepare for the new beginning. The grand new world that is soon to come. Let the world above burn. We will endure, let the monsters have their world. We will prepare, and let the ground tremble with a new Armageddon as evil consumes itself. For I tell you, citizen, upon the day of the ruination of man, their insatiable appetites will turn them against one another in their endless lust for death. We will wait.
Cheerful.
Sounds pretty cultish. Okay, so I really liked the artwork in this. Like the portrayal of UnLondon was pretty cool. This is kind of the first one we've seen like where it isn't like animation, and it's more just like the pictures themselves. It kind of reminds me of like Luton style that we've done for Warhammer 40K on our other channel.
The artwork was amazing.
Yeah, very beautiful, and like the city of UnLondon looks cool in the pictures. Like they said, like it looks very beautiful. But I mean, it seems like, you know, they're gonna, like, if some of the buildings like don't have floors and whatever, like if this is gonna be a safe haven, like they need to, I don't know, like maybe the what are the guys called, the policemen?
Bobbies.
Maybe the bobbies need to like be like work a little construction, like, you know, and just maybe do some of that.
There are a couple of things that just kind of struck me about this. One was the idea of Victorian London as a safe haven. Victorian London was pretty rotten, if we're honest. That's why so many of the British aristocracy went to the country, had large country estates. It was because London itself in the Victorian time was dirty and disease-ridden and smelly, and there was no social infrastructure to take care of people. So if you were poor and you were in the city, you were screwed, and you had a miserable existence. So to think of a end of the world safe haven constructed as a place that was incredibly unforgiving to anybody who wasn't rich and privileged at the time strikes me as an odd choice, I guess, for whoever or whatever created this. The Bobbies are terrifying in this world as they described them. The Wretches, I do want to know how they betrayed the city.
No, he said they betrayed the city, but like they could have been betrayed something else. The SCP itself that created this place, we'll call it SCP Paranoid Man. That's, you know, kind of like built this shelter in this haven. It might have been something that betrayed like some sort of ideal that this SCP holds, or because like I mean, so the criminals themselves are like sewn together and like played the Bobbies, right?
Yeah.
So the Wretches, maybe they are the rich that betrayed society and now have to go back and beg for food and money.
Or maybe they're the ones who witnessed the crimes and didn't speak out on behalf of the innocent.
Ah, true. Pack a frickin' cooler and some, like, you know, dried food and whatnot,
yeah.
because I'm not eating that goose stuff. Oh, jeez.
Oh.
No, thank you. It just, yeah, I mean, it seemed like, one, the SCP that created this is clearly a slumlord, because not keeping very good upkeep of UnLondon. And, you know, it's like this SCP, like, thought that the world was going to end very, very shortly, so created this world, I don't know, like, almost like in an instant, because it's all set in the same time period, and this has never updated it, and maybe, like, has no concept of time itself.
How awful it was in Victorian.
Well, yeah, that too. So you have to let us know what you thought about this down below in the comments, and yeah, more suggestions for SCP videos to check out. We have an SCP playlist down below in the description of this video that you should check out for more of our reactions. And just keep in mind that our reaction to SCP 1678 UnLondon by the Exploring series.
Ooh, I almost jumped in there.
It's okay.
Is definitely not definitive.
I paused for a second and then I added it in there.
Yeah,
so that's fine. I got you.
He threw me again.